Hello and welcome to a study on the Psalms. This lesson is going to begin an examination of Psalm 20, a psalm of David and a psalm written as a prayer for the king. This psalm has been interpreted in various ways, but generally is understood to be a prayer for the leader of God's people. In the Old Testament, as David wrote this, that would have been the king of Israel. Under the New Testament, we can interpret this prayer as a prayer for our King, Jesus Christ. In this particular lesson, we are going to examine the first 5 verses of the psalm in a very general way and talk about the subject of praying for others. In lessons to come, we'll look more specifically at the prayer for the King of Israel. We'll look at verses 6 through 8 and talk a little bit about national confidence in spiritual matters and in a relationship with God. And then finally, we will talk about it as how do we apply this psalm most specifically to our relationship with Christ. But let's begin this set of lessons by reading Psalm 20. Psalm 20, a prayer, or a psalm of David rather. May the Lord answer you in the day of trouble. May the name of the God of Jacob protect you. May he send you help from the sanctuary and give you support from Zion. May he remember all your offerings and regard with favor your burnt sacrifices. May he grant you your heart's desire and fulfill all your plans. May we shout for joy over your salvation, and in the name of our God set up our banners. May the Lord fulfill all of your petitions. Now I know that the Lord saves his anointed. He will answer him from his holy heaven and with the saving might of his right hand. Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. They collapse and fall, but we rise and stand upright. O Lord, save the king. May he answer us when we call. In 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 through 12, the Apostle Paul tells Timothy that he desires that prayer be made for all people, and most specifically, that Christians learn to pray for the king and for leaders and for those in authority, that we might lead a quiet and peaceful life in righteousness. As we think about praying for others, and as we think about praying for our king, or in the United States, we would pray for our president and our congressmen, we might ask ourselves, well, what is the right way to pray? How does God really want us to pray on behalf of our leaders? And here in Psalm 20, we have one example of a godly man teaching the nation how to pray for a godly king. Now I'm going to come back to that thought towards the end of this lesson concerning the godliness of the one being prayed for. But it is good and right to pray for others. Unfortunately, it seems that all too often when we pray, our prayers are focused on self. What do I want? What do I need? And when we do pray for others, it can sometimes be in a very general way. And this is true as well when we pray for our leaders, that sometimes when Christians pray for their leaders, they pray in a very general way that they will accomplish God's will. But the Bible actually teaches us that specificity in our prayers is a good thing, and that as we bring our desires to God, even though He knows what we're going to pray for before we ever pray it, it is good to think about what it is we're actually asking. And as we think about it, our minds are focused on that which is good and righteous. I'm going to look at the first 5 verses of this psalm in this lesson and talk about them in a general way about here are some things that we can pray for when we pray for other people. And then, time permitting, we'll come back and also talk about how do we apply this to prayers for our leaders. So we have David making several requests here. And if I was going to outline the psalm, verses 1 through 5, I would describe as a benediction for the king. May God bless you. Now, David doesn't actually use the word blessing here within the psalm, but the things that he is asking for tend to contribute to a state of blessedness. May the Lord answer you in days of trouble. Here we have a prayer for God's help. Not help for self, but help for another. May God come to you in your time of need, in the day of trouble. There are going to be difficulties in your life. And so as I consider your life, I want God to be there for you, not just in the good times, but most specifically in your day of trouble. Second thing that David says is, may the name of the God of Jacob protect you. Now, name here stands in for God's authority. It's not a magic word that his name, when we speak it, just suddenly confers blessings. Rather, God has a name of power and authority, and so his actual, the prayer is his actual authority provides you protection. You are sheltered under him as your watchman and your guard, and he's going to keep you safe in his stronghold. And so as we consider others and they're having difficulty, we want God to authorize help for them and to come in and answer in that particular day. May he send you help from the sanctuary and give you support from Zion. Now, Zion was the temple mountain, and so God's throne was within the temple, and again David is continuing this idea of God providing personal assistance. But there's a suggestion here of providential help. God is going to arrange things from his throne so that you are taken care of. And as we pray for other people, this is what we want for them. We want God to be there to shelter them, protect them, and arrange things in their life so that they are taken care of. They receive the help that they need. And that help is very likely not going to come in a miraculous way, but God is going to arrange providentially the world in a way that suits the needs of his people. There's a prayer for the acceptance of your worship. May he remember all your offerings and regard with favor your burnt sacrifices. Now, God is going to accept our worship when we are in a right relationship with him, when we are living our lives according to his dictates and his commandments. And so a prayer for the acceptance of another's worship is a multi-layered sort of request. You're praying that they are going to worship. You're expecting them to worship. You're expecting them to worship while in a right relationship with God, and you want God to accept that worship. You are mindful then, when you're praying, of the other's spiritual journey and spiritual needs. When we pray for others, so often what we pray for is their health, their finances, their jobs. We pray for their physical needs. But here David is teaching the people very specifically, pray for their spiritual relationship with God, that it will be good. Verse 4, may He grant you your heart's desire and fulfill all your plans. That is, we want God to actually step in and make others have joyous, happy lives and successful lives. May we shout for joy over your salvation. And again, there's a multi-layered sort of message here. Your salvation from the day of trouble, but as Christians we need to also be thinking of the salvation of the soul. And so again, praying that things will work out for others, but that they will actually be saved. May we shout for joy over your salvation. And in the name of our God, set up our banner. May the Lord fulfill all your petitions. That is, we're not just praying for you. We're praying that when you pray, God will answer your prayers. And so take these verses and think about them as you pray for others. Now let's very briefly talk about praying for leaders this way. We want our leaders to have a good relationship with God. We don't just want them making decisions that benefit us economically. We want them to have salvation. We want our leaders to be able to worship God and be in a relationship with God where God is accepting their sacrifices, and God is accepting what they do, and God is, because of the right relationship with Him, providing them guidance and protection. Ultimately, this is the kind of leadership that we should desire in our nation. We might, kind of foreshadowing some lessons yet to come, consider that this is the kind of leadership we have in the church, where Christ is in a right relationship with God. Now, as we approach the end of these thoughts, let's acknowledge that this is a prayer from a righteous individual to a righteous God for righteous leadership. This is not a prayer that is necessarily appropriate to pray for those whom we know are doing wrong. If we know that someone is doing wrong and has wrong desires, we should not be praying for God to fulfill or grant their heart's desires. God is not going to answer the prayers of a sinful man, nor is He going to fulfill sinful requests. And so there is unspoken in the psalm, but understood, the idea that the one being prayed for is worthy of this prayer. Now, not everybody is going to be worthy, and in fact none of us are ever going to be fully worthy of such prayers, and so there's an element of graciousness to this prayer. But by and large, this is a prayer asking for God to fulfill righteous plans and give a righteous victory. And so we do need to be mindful of that as we go forward. In our next lesson, we're going to talk about this as a prayer before battle, and kind of how it is appropriate at the cross and for the church. And then following that, we'll get into verses 6 through 8 in our third lesson. Until that time, I hope that these thoughts upon the psalm have been of some benefit to you. And until our next time together, God bless you, and you have a fantastic and great day.